Good morning, everybody. By now, you have probably heard about the lockdown by order of Santa Cruz County Health Advisory Board. And I don't know how that strikes you. I don't know if it angers you, frustrates you, concerns you, if you feel anxious or fearful. But I want to just bring some encouragement to you this morning. And I hope to do this every day, just to bring a short devotion, something for you to think about, something that will encourage you and perhaps even challenge you during this COVID-19 pandemic that we are facing. And so let me read a passage to you from John chapter 4. Jennifer and I have been reading through the Gospel of John. We read a chapter a day, and we came across John chapter 4 this morning. It's a very famous story. It's a story about Jesus and his encounter with the Samaritan woman. And it starts off like this. He had to go through Samaria on his way, and eventually he came to the Samaritan village of Sychar, near the field that Jacob gave his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired for the long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. Soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Please give me a drink." He was alone at the time because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food. The woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. One of the things that struck me this morning was how Jesus breaks through barriers to get to us. And in this story, there are several barriers that Jesus is breaking through. Jesus breaks through the barrier of religion. He breaks through the barrier of race. He breaks through the barrier of gender. He breaks through socioeconomic barriers, through political barriers. But there is a more significant barrier that Jesus is going to break through with this woman. I'll come back to that in a sec. And so this woman is surprised that he would even talk to her. And so she said to him, "You're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" And Jesus replied, "If you only knew the gift that God has for you and who you are speaking to, you would ask me and I would give you living water. But sir, you don't have a rope, you don't have a bucket, and this well is very deep. Where would you get this living water? And besides, do you think you're greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us this well? How can you offer better water than he and his sons and his animals enjoyed?" Now Jesus here does this. He's a master teacher. He's often talking about spiritual things while we are on this earthly, physical plane. But he's the master teacher, and he invites this woman to think. He maybe confuses her at first, but it makes her think. It helps her begin to grasp what the invitation Jesus has for her. Now listen to what Jesus says as he goes on. "Anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again, but those who drink the water I give will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life." And listen to her response. He begins to pique her interest. She is hungry, she's thirsty, she's longing. "Please, sir," the woman said, "give me this water, and then I'll never be thirsty again." But look at where she goes. "Then I won't have to come out here and get the water anymore. Go and get your husband." Whoa, what is Jesus doing? Where's he going with this? Jesus actually is testing this woman here. Jesus is exposing something that needs to be exposed for this woman to really grasp who Jesus is and who Jesus is for her. But listen to her response. And I imagine that as she responded to Jesus, she lowered her head, she lowered her eyes. I imagine that a sense of guilt, maybe even shame, began to flood her mind and her heart. "I don't have a husband," the woman replied. But look at Jesus' response. This is so beautiful because Jesus is not condemning her, Jesus is not judging her, but Jesus is speaking the truth. Jesus wants to deal with the root of the issue that this woman has. You're right. You don't have a husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and you aren't even married to the man that you're living with now. You have certainly spoke the truth. That is maybe one of the most important things in this passage, that we are honest with who we are. We are honest with our sin, with our shortcomings, with our failures. But I want you to notice that Jesus doesn't come to us as a judge, as condemning. He doesn't want to humiliate us. He doesn't want to shame us. He wants to set us free from the things that get in the way of us experiencing that overwhelming, bubbling over life when we drink from His well. And so her response is this. She gets religious. She begins to deflect the real issue because he hit a point of pain in her life. He hit a point of shame in her life. And so she begins to try to deflect the conversation. Sir, the woman said, you must be a prophet. So tell me, why is it that you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place of worship, while we Samaritans claim it is here on Mount Gerizim, where our ancestors worship? But Jesus is going to go to the heart of the issue once again and what true worship really is. It's not about a place. It's about a person. And it's about our attitude and approach to worship. Jesus replied, believe me, dear woman, the time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. You Samaritans know very little about the one that you worship, while we Jews know all about him, for salvation comes through the Jews. But there is a time coming, indeed it's here now, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. The Father is looking for those. Notice he's looking, he's searching, he's wanting to find true worshipers. He's looking for those who will worship him that way. For God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. And the woman said, I know the Messiah is coming, the one who is called Christ. And when he comes, he will explain everything to us. Then Jesus told her, I am the Messiah. Just then his disciples came back, and they were shocked to find him talking to a woman. But none of them had the nerve to ask, what do you want with her? Why are you talking to her? Notice that even Jesus' disciples understood the cultural tension here, understood the cultural norms, that Jesus was breaking through this barrier. And just then the woman left her jar of water beside the well and ran back to the village, telling everyone, come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could he possibly be the Messiah? And so the people came streaming from the village to see him. Meanwhile, the disciples were urging the rabbi, eat something. But Jesus replied, I have a kind of food you know nothing about. And of course that confuses them because they're no different than the Samaritan woman. Jesus is talking on the spiritual plane. They're thinking and living on the physical plane. Did someone bring him food while we were gone? The disciples asked each other. And then Jesus explained, my nourishment comes from doing the will of God who sent me and from finishing the work. You know the saying, 4 months between planting and harvest. But I say, wake up and look around. The fields are already ripe for harvest. The harvesters are paid good wages. The fruit that they harvest is people brought to eternal life. What joy awaits both planter and the harvester alike. You know the saying, one plants and another harvests. And it's true. I sent you to harvest where you didn't plant. Others had already done the work, and now you will get to gather the harvest. This woman is no different than you and I. She was born with a longing and a need and a desire to be loved. But there's a problem. Because at the very same time that she has this longing and this desire to be loved, she also has a longing to be known. I mean, fully known. But like you and me, she knows that if she is fully known, then she could probably never be fully loved. How could anyone love someone like her? How could anyone love someone who had the problems and the failures and the sin that she had? And that is the most significant barrier that Jesus breaks through at this point, the sin barrier. The barrier that separates a holy and perfect and righteous God from you and me. And what Jesus exposes here is this woman's deepest longing. It's not being found in men. She's on her sixth man. It's not being found in the water that she draws from this well. And so Jesus invites her, and she invites you and me to something more, to something better. But in order to experience that, in order for us to drink from that well, we have to be exposed in the same way that this woman was exposed. And we have to tell the truth about our sin in the same way this woman told the truth about her sin. But notice, we don't do that to a condemning judge. We do that to a loving, inviting Jesus, the one who comes to bring us into relationship, to bring us into friendship. And he is the only one who fully knows us and yet at the same time fully loves us. Our greatest desire is to be fully loved, but our greatest fear is to be fully known. And yet in Jesus, because of who he is and what he did for us, ultimately dying on the cross, means that yet, while we are fully known, we are still fully loved, as we are, not as we ought to be.